For generations, they have been the two biggest names in terror. He may get the blood, but I'll get the glory.
Freddy's coming back.
This summer, for the first time ever, she's mine! Two legends will come together.
It's time to put this bad dog to sleep. For God!
Freddy vs. Jason. Winner kills all. Rated R.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pod and the Pendulum, the horror movie podcast that is covering every single horror movie franchise, one movie in one episode at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Snoonian, joined once again by my other fantastic host, Jerry Smith. Jerry,
what is up, guys?
How are you feeling about covering your favorite movie in the franchise tonight?
See, I'm really depressed right now, not because of Freddy vs. Jason, but I was just on Twitter and I saw Cobra was trending, so I was excited for a second, and I guess it's just some healthcare shit. So.
Okay. Well, you know what else is trending right now is Harley Race passed away today, which is really sad.
Oh, that is a bummer. But definitely. But Freddy vs. Jason is not my favorite sequel, but I am very excited to talk about it.
I think, you know what? Sometimes our not favorite movies are the most fun to talk about. Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, earlier online, I think it was Nat Brimmer was saying that he was probably going to skip this episode because I didn't like it. But
yeah, Nat, if you skip this, we will come to your house and make you listen.
I love talking about movies I'm not a fan of. Like, I try not to get malicious. I felt bad about Jason Goes to Hell, that episode, because then a day or two ago, I noticed online that there was an article shared, I think from Dread Central or something like that, but Adam Marcus was talking about how people have been very cruel. And for a second, I was just like, oh, shit. Oops.
So I emailed Adam because we were going to record a bonus episode, and I sent him a link, and I'm like, 3 out of 4 of us really love it, and I haven't heard back yet.
Shit, so, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know what? I think that it's more an email thing because he seems to be really upfront about enjoying talking to people about the movie and his experience doing it, and I think, in all honesty, it has experienced a bit of a re-examination in the past few years, so we'll see. Plus, he could probably kick the shit out of both of us, let's face it.
Oh, so, dude, anybody can kick the shit out of me.
I am so not a tough guy. It's incredible.
No, see, that's what I love about having somewhat of a harder exterior. Some people think I'm like a badass, and they get to know me, and they're like, no, he's basically a Nicholas Sparks novel.
I was counseling a 9-year-old today, and we were playing one-on-one basketball during our counseling, and he was beating me pretty badly at the time. And he's like, "Are you letting me win?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm just not very athletic, dude." So I did end up winning. I did turn it up a notch because I absolutely will not let kids beat me.
Well, after you started talking shit, you threw elbows and stuff.
He talked so much trash.
It's always 9 and 10-year-olds, man.
Oh my God.
My son is the biggest shit talker, and it's like, what? Get out of here. Go clean your room.
Here, Lacey, come on up. My doggy is with us tonight. You can hear her in the background. She's going to try to join us. All right, so we have another guest tonight. So we are joined by Alex DiVincenzo from BrokeHorrorFan.com, and also the director of a number of shorts, including one that I really enjoyed, The Horrors of Autocorrect, which is a really funny horror comedy short that I remember seeing at the Boston Underground Film Fest. It might have been 2 or 3 years ago now as part of their homegrown horror selection. Alex, how are we?
I'm doing good. Tough act to follow following a dog, but I'm excited to be here.
She's a really good dog, but, you know, she poops in the room sometimes, so you might be able to...
her and me both.
So there we go. All right. Finding out things already. So, Alex, I always love to start by asking what it is about the Friday the 13th series that you really enjoy. Like, what was it that drew you to the series, and why have you kind of maintained that love for it through the years?
Overall, I think, Halloween's my favorite movie of all time. Like many kids getting into horror, I started with the slashers. Which leads into my love of Freddy vs. Jason, but I'll talk about that in a second. I think Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween are two of my favorite movies. They're much stronger than any individual Friday the 13th, in my opinion. But the Friday the 13th series overall is it's like comfort food. You know what you're getting. It never deviates particularly far from its formula because it knew what worked. And even when it does deviate, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's still kind of fits like a glove. I think that's something that the other franchises lack. They kind of, for better or for worse, went all over the place. So there was a lot of inconsistency, but Friday the 13th is just so consistent throughout. It's one of those things you can just put on any entry, any time of day, and I'll sit there and watch it.
Sure. Any particular entry that like really calls to you?
My favorites are Part 4 and Part 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're all on the same page right there. And if you add those two numbers up, you get Part 10, which is what we covered last week. And it's nothing to do with our episode tonight. So.
Brilliant plug, bro.
So,
I was trying to do the math in my head. I was like, wait, I don't think we're on that episode.
And what was it about when you saw that we were going to cover Freddy versus Jason? What was it that said, like, yeah, I want to get in on this episode?
Okay, so I'll try to make a long story short here, but Freddy vs. Jason is kind of responsible for making me a horror fan.
Okay.
I knew of Freddy and Jason, like, pop culturally, but I hadn't seen any of the movies before it came out. And then, I just remember it really piqued my interest. I was, I think, 14 at the time. So it's like a good age to start getting into horror, I guess. I didn't really have like the cool older sibling or friend or whoever like who got me into horror when I was a kid. So a little bit of a late bloomer, but when Freddy vs. Jason came out, I was super interested. It had like a really cool soundtrack with a lot of bands that I loved at the time. And just, looked like a fun movie, but I didn't want to really spend all the time to watch 17 movies before I could see the new one. So in my naive brain, I was like, oh, I can just watch the original Friday the 13th and the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'll like get the gist of it, and then just go into Freddy vs. Jason. So I remember renting the first Nightmare on Elm Street, like instantly loved it. It's always been a favorite of mine. I was like, wow, that was amazing. Like if Friday the 13th is half this good, like I can't wait to see Freddy vs. Jason. Rented Friday the 13th. So confused, so disappointed by the end. I was like, well, that's Jason? Like, where's the hockey mask? I think like everybody who saw Friday the 13th after hearing so much about it. And obviously, I eventually went back and saw them all, but I kind of just went into Freddy vs. Jason with my limited knowledge. And I loved every second of it. Now, granted, this was, like I said, I was 14 or so. So, it just really spoke to me. I love, like, the sense of humor, the bloodshed, the cast is fun, the cinematography is fun. It has, like, a WWE-worthy final battle. Love the soundtrack. Now, I know nostalgia probably clouds my judgment, but, like, even now I'm 30, and I still love all those aspects. It's still not my favorite entry in either franchise, but I have such a fondness for not only what it did for me getting into the series, but as it stands as a whole, which I know we're going to talk about all the drafts that went into it, I still feel like this one kind of got the essence of both Freddy versus Jason the best from what I've read.
How easy was it where this was kind of like one of your first three you saw? You mentioned you saw the original of each and that's it. How easy did you find it to kind of follow what was going to happen in the movie? Like, I take it that most of the people that saw this they would have been well versed in both franchises. How easy was it for you to kind of get an understanding of what was going on?
More or less understood. The one thing that I always assumed, bad with names, I should have the cast in front of me, but the brother who's dead, who shows up in the bathtub, who commits suicide, I always assumed he was like a character from one of the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of shocked when I went back and he wasn't. But other than that, I mean, it was pretty straightforward. And I think, again, I think that's a relatively smart approach because people like me who hadn't seen any other movies could go in and still enjoy it. It didn't have, as much as now as a fan, I would have loved if like Tommy Jarvis was in this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been so confused. And another thing for not being super well versed in horror, I was still scared by this. Like it affected me. I mean, I think both the original Nightmare and to a smaller extent, the original Friday the 13th as a 14-year-old are like relatively scary. Mm-hmm. And this one obviously to an even lesser extent, but it's still like it has like a few moments that kind of caught me off guard. Pretty good atmosphere to it for what it is.
Cool. So I think the best way to start this episode is because this is such a long gesticulating project. Like people had talked about Freddy versus Jason since the mid 80s, since probably since the final chapter and the original Nightmare on Elm Street. People wanted this movie. They wanted to see these two titans. And it took almost 20 years to bring it to life, with really a decade going into like trying to develop this movie. So let's talk a little bit about what went into trying to bring this to the screen. I can tell you, everybody, right now that the book that I am pulling most of my notes from is really fantastic. It is called Slash of the Titans, and it was written by, bear with me here for 1 second, folks, Dustin McNeil. Slash of the Titans, The Road to Freddy versus Jason. It's a really breezy read. It basically dives deep into just about every potential script or every script that was turned in. It interviews a number of the key players, including Ken Kersinger and Robert Englund, who obviously were your Jason and Freddy in this movie. And it's a really fun read. I cannot recommend it enough. Jerry, you've mentioned actually reading some of these scripts. So why don't you, if you can, talk a little bit about what your initial reaction was to some of the scripts that were brought up?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember 1999, I was 18, and I came across one of the scripts that I can't remember who wrote it, but that was the script that made me very excited about the film. I mean, I think maybe that's why I was somewhat disappointed, because I just loved the script so much. The script I read had the survivors from Jason Goes to Hell and Alice from, Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and 5 teaming up and basically going head to head with Freddy, with Jason, and so on. And there was this huge fight in hell at the end. There were all these little Easter eggs. I mean, Michael Myers' mask, Leatherface's chainsaw. It was just filled with so many homages to both series and other horror franchises that it was just such a fun read. And also, I mean, it was cool just to follow kind of characters from both of the series, seeing like where they would go next. Yeah, like it was really good read.
It sounds like that would have been really fun, and I think it would have been, I know, Alex, you said it might have been hard to follow if you had to like keep up with a bunch of characters from previous series, but for the folks that had been like really had grown up on these movies, it might have been really entertaining to see some of these characters come back overall.
Yeah, I think it would have limited accessibility slightly, but I mean, if you're calling your movie Freddy versus Jason, I mean, you're going to get butts in seats anyway, so why not service the fans, I suppose?
Well, I mean, I understand both approaches. I understand not holding the film kind of to the set of rules where they have to have people from previous movies. I think that, like Alex said, that would have limited accessibility. And I think that's a smart move from, a business perspective. Let's get as many people in there. Let's not confuse them. That's fine. I just think it's more like the hardcore fans that, I mean, you get this movie, and I'll try not to get negative this episode. I actually don't have this burning hatred towards Freddy versus Jason. That's more of a Jason Goes to Hell thing. But I'm sorry, Adam Marcus. But anyways, no, I mean, the movie's fun. My issue is that where does this movie take place? Or I don't mean like location wise. I mean, where in stories? Because we've went through how many movies with Jason, how many movies with Freddy. And this is kind of like a Jason X in the sense that Jason X is so many years in the future that it's just like, well, I mean, the mentality is like, oh, well, anything could have happened, and that just led us to Jason in space. I want to know where in both of the series Freddy versus Jason is.
Right.
I believe if you read the final script, it's supposed to be after Jason Goes to Hell. Like, I know now he comes out like with his full like hockey mask and machete. But I believe that was established in the script that Jason doesn't come like just out of the ground like that. Like he comes up from where he was sucked in at the end of Jason Goes to Hell. I think. And
that's the Shannon and Swift wrote that?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, because I know a lot of their stuff was kind of rewritten after the fact. So
yeah, definitely. There was also a passing reference to Tommy Jarvis in their script, like that he was trying to stop the construction, which is why there's all the construction that's never really explained in the final movie.
Yeah,
construction at Crystal Lake.
Oh wow.
So I want to read you a quote from Slash of the Titans, and this kind of ties into the script or not the script so much because I don't think it ever went to from idea to page, but the idea overall. So I'm just going to quote you from the book, and then you can tell me who you think came up with this idea. For my money, I wanted the first scene to be Freddy in his environment. Jason shows up and fucks up that environment, much like there's a scene in the movie where that happens. Then suddenly the floor splits between them, and you realize they're in hell. The idea was that both of these guys were hell's assassins. For me, the idea of hell having an assassin that kills teenagers when they've sinned so that they go straight to hell was interesting. My movie would have started with hell spitting them back up to earth, where it would become a contest between them. I would have brought back in Nancy Thompson and Tommy Jarvis as the main characters. I would have also brought back Creighton Duke, who would have survived Jason Goes to Hell.
Adam
The million-dollar questions, folk. Whose idea was this?
Adam Marcus.
Adam fucking Marcus. In your face, Jerry. I would pay twice to see this movie because that sounds awesome. I really love that idea over it.
No, that's kind of my big thing about Freddy versus Jason. Like I said, I'm not like, I don't have a lot of venom to spew at the movie. It's a fun movie. It's just with all the million ideas and different drafts that it went through. Like I remember going to the theater and walking out saying, out of all of that, this is what we ended up with. Like, like there's hints of greatness, I think, in the movie. But I just remember following the whole development. I mean, since my teenage years, and it's just like, give me something more. Give me something.
Do you think you felt that at the time, or do you think that at the time I remember walking out of this movie feeling really excited and really enjoying it, and then maybe looking back later going, I wonder if we could have had more. Did you feel that immediately after walking out of the theater?
I think it was the opposite. I walked out of the theater really kind of annoyed and irritated by the movie, and as time has gone on, like I've learned to appreciate the movie more. I'm finally to the point where I could watch Freddy versus Jason and be like, oh, that's cool. I mean, I think my son loves it with a passion. I mean, and that's exciting to me, but it's not a bad movie. It's just like, I mean, the title itself just invokes this epic feeling, you know what I mean? And it's just like, aside from that final fight, which I do love, I love that, and it's so gory and just it's great. But aside from that, like if you really think about it, like I mean, Jason's kind of like Freddy's little bitch throughout the whole movie, and it just it's frustrating because I want Jason just knock Freddy's ass out 24/7. So to see a movie where Jason's kind of like a puppet the whole time, like even Jason was led by his mom or, his love for his mom and that kind of stuff in the earlier films, but he was never just kind of like this pushover. You know what I mean? Like Freddy vs. Jason feels like Jason is that bullied kid who at the end finally steps up to his bully. You know what I mean? Like that's not the Jason that I just grew up loving. My Jason was a force of nature who definitely wasn't afraid of water at all. He was afraid of drowning. I mean, he walks his ass right into the water to get Tommy at the end of 6. He's in the water at 7. He gets on a fucking cruise in 8. He's not afraid of the water. He's just afraid of drowning. So I feel like, I mean, we'll get into this more, but I feel like Ronnie Yu's kind of detachment from the characters made that film and the development suffer more.
So I definitely want to tackle all. You made 4 really good points there. First, I want to say no puppet. You're the puppet. But I do want to talk about. The characterization of both Freddy and Jason later. Yeah. Obviously, Ronnie Yu's detachment. I think that's a really good way to look at it overall. I think those are 2 things, and also the whole. Is Jason afraid of the water thing? So I think Shannon and Swift have both addressed that after the fact. And we asked them very nicely if they would like to come on and talk about this movie. And they told us to go pound sand. So as far as I'm concerned, the gloves are off. No, they were very kind. They were very busy.
I think there's literally one person we've asked that basically told us to.
So the first script that was turned in was by Louis Abernathy, who is not quite known for his script work. He's actually a private investigator, surveillance expert, treasure hunter, armorer, weapons manufacturer, and deep ocean explorer. Yeah, I know. Like, I'm reading this again from...
And they didn't make his script?
I feel like this is going to be like... basically me reading Slash of the Titans from like chat page to page. But apparently the first script was Freddy versus Jacques Cousteau, which I wondered why it didn't get made. But who is Louis Abernathy, for starters? He's variously an actor, writer, script doctor, director, effects maker, private investigator, surveillance expert, which to me is like creep that peers in the window, treasure hunter, armorer, like what armorer? Armorer, he makes armor, weapons manufacturer, like what the fuck, and deep ocean explorer.
I feel like Louis Abernathy is like that era's Mark Duplass.
So it's incredible. So he turns in a script that then gets rewritten by David Shaw, who is a splatterpunk author of a number of books. Really cool. This never quite gets to greenlit. New Line Cinema and Sean Cunningham do not get on the same page. So I want to give you guys a quick rundown. Does either of you guys know the rundown of this first script?
I don't, but I will say, like, Louis Abernathy did write the story for Deep Star 6, so
yeah, that makes sense.
So he had the Cunningham connection, right?
So I think what we need to do is get Louis Abernathy on the show, and I really want to talk about.
I want to talk about his treasure hunting,
surveillance and treasure hunting,
and he directed House 4, guys. So you know what?
So
He's qualified.
So let me give you a very brief rundown, and you guys let me know what you think here.
Let's do it.
First thing, this is the script that initially adds the Fredheads to the story. This idea that a number of cult worshippers were worshiping Freddy Krueger. Shaw retains a lot of Abernathy's elements, except he takes them in a really dark direction. For example, the Fredheads would actually go as far as to burn themselves, so they would have all these burn scars so they could look like Freddy Krueger, their hero.
Whoa, that is great.
There is a flashback in the movie that shows Freddy as a human being responsible for drowning Jason Voorhees. So the connection between them now is Jason recognizes Freddy and he wants to exact his revenge. It takes place in a televangelism studio for the last act, and there's a showdown between Freddy, Jason, the teenagers in the movies, the state police, and the cultists. And if I remember correctly, that basically everybody dies in this movie. Like there's a massive shootout. The kids aren't really spared. The police aren't spared.
What?
Cultists aren't spared. It was going to culminate in an absolute fucking bloodbath overall. So yeah, it's a really dark movie, especially in Shaw's rewrite of it.
Give me that movie, but one part of that approach that it's always just made me laugh is hearing the term Fredheads. Like I don't care if it's like slapstick comedy or like Martyrs level heavy. Like you will never be taken.
Okay, so let's. Are you still there? Did Jerry drop out?
No, I'm good.
My bad. Okay, so speaking of dark and speaking of Martyrs level darkness. The plan or plot revolves around the Fredheads in kidnapping and impregnating a virgin bride, Now, this virgin bride, how old was Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 6?
Oh, boy. In the timeline, I mean, she was what? I think maybe 15?
Yeah, I was going to
16?
get 16, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, this movie would actually top it in terms of creepiness. It would be a 13-year-old girl named Lizzie who, depending on who you ask, was special needs.
Jesus.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's fucking dark shit right there.
That's like True Detective shit.
Yeah. So, Alex...
Like, I want McConaughey in this.
So, Alex, let me get your opinion. So, you go into this movie, you see a 13-year-old impregnated by a bunch of burned cult victims, and everybody dies through a shootout at the end. How would you walk in? How would you receive this movie? Walking out of it?
I'm not so sure I'd be as excited to see the rest of the movies at that point. I think the Fredheads, despite the name is super cheesy, but the cult of Freddy is a really cool idea. And I think if you're trying to reboot Nightmare on Elm Street like today with Robert Englund, I think that's a really cool entry point to have these people who are just like dedicated to him, like almost copycats to an extent. But I don't think it was a smart approach for Freddy versus Jason because it placed, and I know there's an argument to be made in the final Freddy versus Jason that there's too much emphasis on one killer or the other, depending on who you ask. But I mean, the Fredheads script, and I know I have read Slash of the Titans, it's been a while, but I do love that book. And I believe like the Fredheads is in like half of the scripts. Like, so somebody really liked that idea to carry it over. And I do think it's, like I said, it's a cool idea, but I just don't think it works for Freddy versus Jason because it just makes it a Freddy movie that happens to have Jason in it.
Right. I think you're right. I think that the Fredheads were in some way, shape, or form in almost every single script until the Shannon Swift draft.
Actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the Fredheads also brought up to when Freddy's Dead was being developed, or am I mistaken? I'm pretty sure Scowl.
What do you remember?
Didn't it? If I could be wrong, so I mean, if I'm wrong, listeners, feel free to tell me I'm full of shit. But I'm pretty sure didn't David Scowl didn't he pitch Freddy's Dead as well and had the Fredheads thing? Or
it's quite possible. I think he was brought on board. It might have been part 5 or part 6 that Shao started to get involved on the peripheral with like the Nightmare on Elm Street series.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been interesting. I like the idea. I mean, I'm with you guys. Like, I think the idea is cool. I mean, I'm good without the 13-year-old because that's kind of creepy. But I mean, the idea of a cult, I think that's perfect for either of the characters, really. But I do agree with Alex that Freddy versus Jason would be probably a misstep to incorporate that into a movie. I mean, because when it's all said and done, it's Freddy versus Jason. You know, that's kind of what you want to focus on.
And I believe some of these drafts introduce, like, there's a cult leader who with some cheesy name, I forget, Damien something.
Dominic Necros.
That's it, Dominic Necros.
That sounds like a white horror rapper.
Yeah, it really does. And like at that point, there's a quote in that book somewhere where somebody's like, imagine like going to see Freddy versus Jason and getting Dominic Necros instead of Freddy. Like, it's just like, it's so beside the point. Like I said, it could work in an Elm Street movie, a standalone Elm Street movie, but not where you're already combining two worlds. Why add like a third element in there?
The only way you could have made the idea worse of like centering the movie around the cult leader like Dominic Necros is if instead of getting Jason, you get Roy. Like Roy comes back.
Freddy.
and like, just to make Jerry happy, Roy's actually a worm. So,
oh god,
that would.
You know what I do wonder though? I wonder if that approach of having the kind of cult obsessed with them. I wonder if maybe Simon Barrett was just a huge fan of that script and worked that into a horrible way to die. Because that movie, I think, is such a great example. Is very awesome. I think it's such a great example of that same kind of approach. You know, these kind of fanatical people obsessed with this murderer who, in a lot of ways, makes it to where that murderer comes back. You know,
I think we should reach out and ask him.
I'll do it.
All right. I think we should reach out. No, you're right. 'Cause it is, I mean, and Alex, to your point, I think it's a really good idea. I think that the idea of this cult that worships a killer can really work. Maybe not in the first Freddy versus Jason movie that fans have been looking for like 2 decades and have thought was going to happen since 1993, since the very end of Jason Goes to Hell. This movie also introduces the idea that although both Freddy and Jason are evil, Jason is less evil and more of an anti-hero that you can kind of rally around because he's not quite as bad as Freddy is. Does that work?
I don't like that because that was one of the many things. And man, I'm sorry, Adam Marcus, that I just didn't like about Texas Chainsaw 3D. Which Adam Marcus did a rewrite on. Like, I don't want these horrible, and I mean horrible in a good way. I don't want these slasher icons that I grew up being afraid of and loving to watch become anti-heroes. I don't want Leatherface to get adopted by his cousin and, you know, and go after bad people. I want. Exactly. I don't want a Jason being, oh, well, he's a bad guy, but he's not as bad as Freddy. I want these awful, despicable people going at it. That's what I want.
Your thoughts, Alex?
I understand the approach because, like, objectively, I mean, Freddy killed and arguably molested children, and Jason is like a confused kid who's still kind of reliving his trauma. Freddy is more evil on an objective stance, but to turn Jason into like an anti-hero, just screams wrong to me. I mean, especially after the last few Jason movies leading up to the movie, where they tried to do something different with him, and it kind of failed every time. At least as a Jason movie. Like, I think Jason X is a fun movie, but a bad Friday the 13th movie.
Right.
It just seems, again, like a counterintuitive to, like, why fix what isn't broken?
Right.
Well, that and like. Jason's kind of a scared kid and he's trying to, deal with all that stuff. I understand that, but he's also the motherfucker who put a machete in a guy in a wheelchair's face and sit him downstairs.
Exactly.
There's no redemption.
I mean, Jason's body count compared to Freddy's, it's got to be about 4 times the amount. Like, the thing about the Elm Street movies, they're not body count movies.
No,
overall.
Not at all.
Like, Freddy's kill count is a fraction of what Jason's is overall.
I feel like Jason doesn't have as much fun with it as Freddy does. Freddy always likes to mess with his victims, set them up with jokes, make them think that they're awake, but they're really dreaming, try to screw with them, kind of like Michael Myers does. Jason, he just wants to hit you in the face with the machete. Like that, and that's what I love about the Friday the 13th movies. There's no reasoning with Jason. There's no joking around with him. I feel like there's this fun back and forth between Freddy and his protagonists in his series because we get characters like Alice and these Nancy and these people that are like they're badass enough to kind of go after him and talk shit back, and that's a fun back and forth. Whereas Jason, I mean, he doesn't care. He just wants to rip your head off.
Yeah, there's no reason. He's a killing machine.
Yeah.
So our next script that was turned in right around by mid-1984, like New Line's like, we're not going to use the Abernathy show draft. Like, it's just not for us. The team of Brannon Braga and Ronald D. Moore, neither of whom have written a horror movie at that point, and I don't believe either of them have since, are brought on board. They are known for their work in Star Trek, specifically writing and producing Star Trek The Next Generation for a number of years. So I think that's a pretty good fit, seeing that Jason's going to go into space sooner than later. But being a Trekkie, Michael DeLuca hires these guys based on those credits overall. And this is a pretty interesting take. Jerry, you touched on this one a little bit when we recorded Jason X. This is the one where Jason is not, from the movies, is not real. Jason is a fictional character that the movie, and the real Jason is someone the movies are all based on. And the movie starts with the real Jason getting caught, and he's going to be put on trial for his crimes. Crystal Lake is being redeveloped once the killer is caught as a luxury resort. And I think that's something that makes its way, even though it's not addressed specifically, it makes its way into the Shannon and Swift draft.
Because of the construction.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm fine with the construction thing and the kind of luxury resort thing. I think that opens it up to some fun, interesting possibilities. It's just the idea that, you know, the movies are based on a real person. And like, that's a little too meta for me when it comes to a Friday the 13th movie. You know, like that's something, I mean, no offense to this series, but I mean, that's something that would be in a Scream movie. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, was this draft written right after Scream? Because it kind of seems like.
This is more written around the time that A New Nightmare would have come out.
Wow.
Okay.
Like 93, 94.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. No, I see. Yeah, I don't. I think that's where the Friday the 13th series have kind of not went down the drain, because I mean every movie has their own fan base, so I try not to you know, slander it. But I think that's where the entries that I'm not a huge fan of kind of suffer, in my opinion, is when they take something that's not broken. You know, they take something, they try to fix it, they try to do something way out there, and I think that a lot of Friday the 13th fans, we don't want the same exact movie over and over. Don't get me wrong, but we want a Friday the 13th movie. And I think before all the legal issues that, you know, Cunningham and Miller have gotten into, I think that's another thing that kind of stopped us from getting a new movie, is that so many people were trying to, I think, overthink it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh, we need a flashback where it'll describe Jason's dad, and there's multiple timelines, and there's marital problems. It's like, no, just give us a Friday the 13th movie. And I think the Braga and the Moore script is definitely one of those ones that's not a Friday the 13th movie at all.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's similar to the Fredhead idea. Like, it's a cool concept and would work in another movie, maybe not something that has a whole franchise, because then how do you sequelize that? That's confusing. But might work as its own standalone project, but again, in Freddy versus Jason, it's just needlessly complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like what I think of Jason X. Like, I agree with Alex, and I think I said that on the last episode too. Like, Jason X is such a fun movie. Like, I wouldn't consider it a good Friday the 13th movie at all, but if it was called something else and there wasn't Friday the 13th before that, Jason X would be great. You know, and if they made a movie based on the Braga and the Moore script and it wasn't a Friday the 13th movie, it was just a slasher, you know, in general, I think it could be interesting. But we have this idea in our own heads, and yeah, it varies from person to person, but we each have these ideas of what a Friday the 13th film is. And I think that it's really important when you make one to respect that as a whole.
I would agree. And I think that it also, I think, would be a major disappointment to fans if they're going to walk in and see their kind of like zombie hockey masked killer that they had come to know and love through the years, and find out that it's just this real guy that kills people. Would have been a massive letdown. One thing that's
it's a slap to the face to every experience that you've had prior. Like, it's the same feeling that I got. Man, I hate dissing the same movies every episode, but it's kind of like the same feeling I got when I walked out of Halloween 6. I was just like, really? That's what I was scared of all these years? Like, someone that's led by a senior citizen cult? Like,
right.
Ass, you know, like, I'm not into that.
And what's funny is I think Halloween 6, the portrayal of the way that Michael is actually portrayed in that movie, the way he moves, the way he stalks, is closer to the first movie. And if you were to remove the cult element, but that's
definitely. I mean, George Wilbur's great.
Yeah. But what you find here, what's interesting, because you mentioned, Jerry, one of your complaints about what we end up getting is that it's too much of a Freddy movie. This is the only script that actually reverses the names on the script, where it's not really Freddy versus Jason, but it's Jason versus Freddy. Jason is much more front and center in this movie. There are some meta elements to it. So to play to the idea of like what you had said, like where, well, does this tie into what Scream was trying to do? There's an element in the courtroom where Jason's public defender lawyer is actually playing.
Sorry.
Yeah, he is playing.
I'm sorry, guys.
It's
Jason's
really
public defender lawyer.
Yes. Yeah.
I never thought I'd hear that sentence in my life.
I know. is playing a scene from a fictional sequel, Friday the 13th, Part 10, Jason's Greatest Hits and Chops, where they're playing like fictional scenes from that movie. So it's almost like Stab the movie playing in Scream 2 in some ways. Like, it's really fucking bizarre.
These are the Star Trek guys, right?
Right. And as the movie is playing, the lawyer is yelling at the screen, like telling the actress on camera, like, don't go in that house or don't follow, you know what I mean? Like, she's, so it kind of pokes, to your point, it pokes a lot of fun. Like, there's things like browsing the horror aisle of a video store. There's a movie called Zombie Sluts from Beyond the Grave, being a seminal film for having the first ever depiction of a fully nude triple impalement. There is a spirited defense of Sean Cunningham's original Friday the 13th, done in courtroom, and one of the attorneys call it garbage. The other lawyer objects and makes a defense of it. Like, really weird shit that is like going on in this movie.
Set phasers to suck.
Oh man. And I think so one of the things is, like, Freddy Krueger in this movie is much darker. They do return him to those roots. And it plays a little bit by the Nightmare on Elm Street 2 rules, where Freddy can pull himself out of the dream world and into the real world. So it kind of goes back to the rules that were in Freddy's Revenge. The climax takes place in a mall, and I think what you had mentioned when we did Freddy versus Jason, Jerry, was like, this is where you see the idea of Robo Jason. Like, Jason sees that chrome mask, and it's like,
he goes in sporting goods, right?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
So end of it, and I think like at the end of this movie, there is like some sort of like, Jason is like considered pretty sympathetic at that point. I don't know. I think that's how it ends up playing itself.
That's a good criminal defense lawyer then.
So yeah,
Like, do they try to fit the glove on Jason, or is that Freddy?
That would have to be Freddy. That would be right around this time too. Holy shit, that would have been
gold.
That would have been fucking gold right there. If the glove don't fit, you must have. What? Oh my God! You go back and remake Nightmare on Elm Street.
Dude! And it would be a great play on like the classic lines, like Freddy trying on the glove, going, "This is odd," because it doesn't fit.
That would be amazing. You remake an Elm Street and you bring in, like, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. And that's how. It's not that the lawyers got fat and the judge got stupid, but it's more that the glove didn't fit. Oh, I love it.
You guys need to stop your legal issues and hire me to write this movie. I will do it for a copy of the new Vice Squad Blu-ray.
All right. So I ask once again, folks, who would you pay to see this movie?
I would. Fuck yeah. That sounds so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the two. I'm more team Fredheads right now, but I do think this has some good ideas, some interesting ideas, I should say. Again, not good for a Freddy vs. Jason movie. Not appropriate for a Freddy vs. Jason movie, I should say. But interesting idea. Like, I always appreciate a good meta movie.
Yes. I think it could work. I think that what works against it is the idea that Jason Voorhees is a fictional movie character. I think that's the biggest strike against it. If you could find a way to rework that in a rewrite, there's some interesting material behind here. Okay, so let's.
See, I would pay for that movie, but after that twist, I would probably ask for my money back.
Can you imagine if that came out and Twitter was around back then?
Oh God.
Oh
my God. Be so bad. So that movie does not get made, obviously. We do not see a Kramer versus Kramer style. Instead of Freddy versus Jason, you get Kramer versus Kramer with two serial killers.
We should get Dustin Hoffman to play Freddy and Meryl Streep to play Jason.
She could do it. Wasn't Meryl Streep in Freddy's Revenge?
No.
She looks
basically, yeah.
Basically, she was. Okay. So here are aside from the movie we got, the next one we're going to talk about is probably the closest thing we got to see being made. Okay, 1997 comes around. Special effects guru, the man behind all the effects we know and love from The Thing, Rob Bottin, is named director of Freddy vs. Jason. August 1997. Not only that, but at a conference called Show West. Do either of you guys know what this is?
Show West? I do not.
It's like a distributor.
Yeah.
You're basically marketing your movies to like distributors, right? So to like
like kind of test trailers and proof of concept.
I believe so, yeah.
It's basically Comic-Con for movie theater distributors. Is the way it sounds. Like you basically get all of these distributors to come in and these studios kind of like show them, here's what we have coming up in the next couple years. How many screens do you want to put this movie on? They actually show a sales reel of Freddy versus Jason. They show, now it doesn't have any footage from Freddy versus Jason because none exists. There's not even a script yet. It shows kind of like a greatest hits package.
Have you seen that?
It is online. I'll put it.
Yeah. I watched it, and it's like the biggest WWE like teaser ever for this movie. Like big symphonic sounds, and it's great. Like I watch that from time to time just to think of what could have happened if Bottin would have done that movie.
And you get pumped watching it. So I would see, and the people at Show West go apeshit for it. They think this is going to be the greatest thing. Variety magazine announces that Rob Bottin is on board. A screenplay is turned in by Ethan Reif and Cyrus Voorhees. They are known for Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, which had been a moderate success and helped kind of revive that franchise a bit. This movie, once again, brings back the Fredheads that were missing from the Ronald Moore script. The Fredheads are trying to revive Freddy Krueger. Jason Voorhees is entered into the script with the idea that they're going to try to stop one monster with another monster. He is revived in a really cool way. He's at the bottom of Crystal Lake right now, kind of like it's the end of part 7. And a still beating heart that has been ripped out of someone's chest is tossed into the lake, makes its way into Jason's chest, and that revives him.
It's a random person?
You know what? I'd have to go back and read it. I
think, if I recall correctly, it's like the final girl's boyfriend, and I want to say his name is also Jason because they just couldn't avoid that.
Oh,
that's
boy.
Really cool. I think that's really cool. The world now, the world we see in Freddy versus Jason, it looks like our world right now. The world of this movie is chaotic. There's global panic, high suicide rates. It's basically chalked up to millennium fever. Because remember, this is 1997, so it's still not quite the turn of the century yet. Mm-hmm. It is still, so basically people fear the world is going to end, and there is a fucking mass chaos everywhere.
Jesus.
Robert Englund years later talks about the script because he received it. He was really high on it. He also says like it's really, really dark, especially the treatment of Freddy. And he even says like there's a hint of pedophilia in the character of Freddy Krueger. So
they brought that back.
It goes back to that idea that was touched upon but never, it was really tiptoed around in the original Elm Street series, that Freddy didn't just kill children, he sexually abused them as well.
That's interesting, and that's one of the only things, I hate to say that I liked, because I obviously don't like pedophilia, but that's one of the things that I appreciated about the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street is they brought Freddy back into being basically a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to hate a character that is, a bastard. And I think that as fun as the sequels are, by the time Freddy versus Jason came out, like Freddy was kind of like, a comedian that everyone's like, oh shucks, like I grew up as a kid wearing that as a costume every year, Freddy or Jason. And it's just like, sometimes you have to sit back and be like, wait a second, like that dude was a pedophile. Like he's not cool.
Right. That's
I think that makes it scarier. Like I want my antagonists in movies to be terrifying. I want them to scare me.
Mm-hmm. Alex, jump on in, but I'm sorry, man. I want to make sure you get plenty of chance to talk. Sorry about that.
No, I appreciate that. No, I think the prospect of Rob Bottin directing is super exciting, just because, I mean, he's such a legend in the effects field, and now is like an enigma. You can't get a hold of him.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been, I wonder what his career would have been like if he started directing, because I don't believe he ever directed anything.
Right.
Quick aside about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, if Freddy was molesting kids and not killing them, why did he have the glove? What was he using the glove for? Like, why did he need a razor glove? But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think this isn't like my favorite draft, but I think setting it in this world, this like almost post-apocalyptic, or I guess like pre-apocalyptic technically world, I don't know, that seems like it would have dated the movie a lot, especially setting it around the millennium. It would have been like another hard pill to swallow on top of already combining these two characters that live in different worlds.
Well, didn't Bottin feel the same way? I mean, didn't he like kind of not really dig that script?
So we'll get to that in one moment. You are 100% correct. So this does bring back the idea of the character of Lizzie needing to be impregnated in order to bring like Freddy back into the real world to kind of rule it over like a hellish landscape. The movie concludes with a battle through the dreamscape, the nightmare world. Okay, Jerry, you mentioned the sizzle reel being like a big WWE.
Yeah.
You don't know how close you were right here, okay?
So let's actually take a minute and insert the sizzle reel track. This is what the distributors at Show West would have heard and seen when New Line presented it in front of them. And we'll link to the video in our show notes, but you can also just go to YouTube and Google Freddy versus Jason Show West. This is what was meant to get kind of the theater distributors excited. It's basically a greatest hits of A Nightmare on Elm Street, along with some clips from the Friday the 13th series overall. And the distributors went bananas for it. Like, they knew that they had a potential massive hit on their hands. And it is like a WWE Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock type of feel to it overall. So let's go listen to that really quick and then come back to the show.
They are the two greatest champions the world has ever seen. All who witness their power fear them. All who try to stop them fail. Now, at last, they will face each other in the fight of the century, in the showdown of the millennium. Miss me. Versus Jason.
Really?
This movie ends in something called a Nightmare Arena. It's a boxing ring with bloody entrails for ropes, and instead of turnbuckles, you have like severed heads on the corner post, okay? You don't. Now, the original idea was to have like Hell's most prominent residents, but instead of that, you have the Fredheads as the crowd. Dominic Necros is your ring announcer, doing the "Let's get ready to rumble" phrase from Michael Buffer.
And then Evanescence starts playing, right?
Yep, there you go. And you have like the Rock's theme song, Stone Cold's theme song. Necros announces Freddy's weight at 160 pounds and Jason at 487 pounds.
So it's a lot like the promotional stuff that Robert Englund and King Kersinger did for Freddy.
They ended up actually doing it. Yeah. They did like the weigh-in in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
it's exactly it. The movie ends, like it looks like Freddy's going to win, and Jason surprises him by ripping off his glove hand and then stabbing him to death with it, and then decapitating Freddy like popping a cork off a champagne bottle. Now, this might have been a bridge too far for fans. I'm going to quote again from Slash of the Titans. The masked Titan, Jason, falls back, dying from his many battle wounds. Jason turns to Michelle and a voice low and hoarse, finishes Freddy's song, "We Can Sleep Again."
Oh God,
this is bad.
Why? That is bad. So I don't know if that's the worst part. I mean, having entrails is wrestling ring ropes and heads.
Yeah. I feel like that'd be cool in a comic book, maybe, but I can't imagine that working on film.
I feel like this whole setup would be a music video for Twisted.
Yeah.
You absolutely know that the song that would be playing would be "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" by Stained. Right.
Wasn't that used in the promotional shit anyways?
It was. Oh, absolutely. That would have been that. It would have been as like Smash Mouth's Rockstar is to Shrek. "Let the Body Hit the Floor" would be to this movie. Absolutely.
For the record, before you get yelled at, "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" is by Drowning Pool. Know your new metal.
Thank you. All right. I am sorry. I am so sorry. 1 point away from me at this point. All right. So, Alex, you can hang the fuck up now, correct? I'm kidding. Thank you.
The people deserve accuracy in your new metal references.
We strive for veracity.
I need to know who is utilizing those 7 strings, all right?
I think the entrails and severed heads would be fun if you did a video game of this. I think like if you had a fighting game of all the killers.
Yeah, it sounds like something in a Mortal Kombat.
Speaking of, have you guys played Videodrome?
I have not.
No.
It's online. It used to be like widely available, but I think they got sued so many times. It's Mortal Kombat with every slasher icon.
Oh, okay.
My God, that sounds awesome.
Oh, it's fun. It has a lot of issues, but yeah, it's a fun game that you could download for free.
Okay, we will.
Because I mean, legally they can't,
sell it. You mean they didn't go about and get the rights?
Oh, right. Like Candyman, Chucky, Ghostface, Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, they're all in it.
Yeah. And holy shit, do you guys know what Ethan Reif and Cyrus Voorhees went on to do?
Hopefully not Freddy versus Jason. No, what is it?
Kung Fu Panda.
Naturally. See, that is a better fit for severed heads and entrails.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, doesn't the final Kung Fu match take place in hell with severed heads and entrails?
And drowning pool.
That's fucking amazing.
Not Stained.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That is fucking amazing.
I mean, the people who ended up writing Freddy vs. Jason wrote Baywatch, so I mean, you gotta feed your family.
Also, in skimming like a little interview with them, they were asked who would they cast as Dominic Necros. 2 guesses.
I have to hear this.
They're musicians you would probably associate with this kind of music.
Oh, Marilyn Manson.
Ding, ding, ding. Marilyn Manson is one of the 2.
Rob Zombie, Alice Cooper.
Well, no.
Harvey Keitel. No, just kidding.
You're gonna have like a head like a hole if you don't guess who it is.
Trent Reznor? Are you serious?
Trent Reznor. That's who they wanted. That's who they wanted to play Dominic Necros.
Like Sage or Filter? No.
Right. So, needless to say, we don't get this movie. Bottin rejects it, and he decides to come up with his own 30-page treatment with the idea that Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees are fictional characters.
Right on.
So 3 scripts are developed, and I'm only going to touch on really one of them because they all pretty much go around the same idea here. I got to say, guys, we're coming up in 1 hour.
We haven't even got to Freddy versus Jason.
How are you guys doing? I want to be respectful. Okay. Alex, how are you? How are you on time?
I'm good. Okay. I might suggest for the listeners' sake, maybe do one episode as the preamble, everything leading up to the movie, then another one as the movie.
I think that might be what we do. And that would actually work for me because I'm going to be leaving the country and I don't fly back until the day that we normally drop an episode. If we broke
there you go. You got your filler set up.
If we broke this into 2, that covers us a little bit. So,
all right.
But yeah,
all right.
Good
so let's talk really slowly then. All right. So David Goyer and James Dale Robinson are brought on to flesh out Bottin's idea. David Goyer would go on to to write the Blade movies. He's also become kind of one of your go-to guys for a lot of superhero movies. I know he's done like rewrites on Batman Begins and a number of other projects. His work is kind of hit or miss, but I mean, he's done some pretty cool stuff. I'm not going to take that away from him overall. here's the deal. David Goyer is not really a big horror movie guy. He's definitely not a big idea. He doesn't really like the idea of combining characters from different franchises. He does it as a favor to Rob Bottin, who had kind of gotten him some work earlier in his career. And he's on the record of saying that crossovers are an admission of franchises on its last gasp.
And then didn't he write Batman versus Superman?
He did. So you are correct.
Good.
So you are correct. So basically, when DC comes around with that DC money, fuck yeah, man! I will write the shit out of Batman versus.
That's like how you can find a tweet conflicting anything out of Donald Trump's mouth. Like he said the opposite 2 years earlier.
There's a tweet for everything. Absolutely. He's like, all right, so here it is. Batman. Oh, you know what? This is even better. Speaking to the Los Angeles Times in 2005, he said, Batman versus Superman is where you go when you admit to yourself that you have exhausted all possibilities.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman or Freddy versus Jason. It's somewhat of an admission that a franchise is on its last gasp. Okay, James Dale Robinson is a writer for DC Comics, best known for creating the character of Starman. Really good series from, I believe, the early to mid 90s overall. And Goyer would go on to write the original Blade, which is a fantastic. I really love the first couple Blade movies. I think they're really fun. Okay?
Well, I mean, like you said, his work is very hit or miss. He's written some movies that I'm a huge fan of, like Death Warrant, or I'm one of the few people that love The Crow City of Angels.
Mm-hmm.
You know? He wrote fucking Dark City, which I think is one of the most underrated movies around.
Dark City is incredible. Yeah.
At the same time, he also wrote Jumper.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote Demonic Toys, which I mean it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I mean, this is the guy that is mostly known for like remakes and sequels. I mean,
right.
he's writing the new Hellraiser remake.
Right.
He wrote the early story for the new Terminator movie. I mean, I mean, no offense to him, but I think if anyone doesn't have a room to speak, it's this dude.
Right. I think it's fair to say he's become a paycheck guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So who was it? I think it might have been who appeared in Dungeons and Dragons that you never would expect to like appear in a movie like that. Who's like the well-known
Marlon Wayans, right?
Marlon Wayans. Let's look this up really quick because he has like a really great quote.
It reminds me of Michael Caine in Jaws 4. He always says like he did it because it paid for his new house or something like that.
That's it. Yeah,
I love that. He can't accept the Oscar that year because he's filming Jaws 4.
Yeah.
That's
and
it.
they ask him if he's ever seen it, and he's like, no, but I've seen the house that it paid for.
That's
yes,
the quote.
exactly.
You know what? I was incorrect about D&D. That's it. Like I've seen the house that it's paid for. And I think with like with the Dungeons and Dragons, the actor was like, sometimes you have to pay for the lighting in your house. Like you got to pay for the shit. So I think Goyer has kind of become that guy. Not to say he hasn't written some really fun movies, but it's what he's come up with. This is where he's kind of at now. So this version of Freddy and Jason assumes that both Freddy and Jason are fictional characters, similar to like A New Nightmare. They are fictional characters that are now bleeding onto the real world. What happened, this is a kind of like Say No to Drugs movie, like Nancy Reagan and Tipper Gore would maybe actually secretly wrote this movie under the names David Goyer and James Reagan.
Can you imagine Tipper Gore using the pen name of David S. Goyer?
That would be amazing.
She's responsible for Dominic Necros.
Oh, my God. Okay. So this has a bunch of teenagers going to Crystal Lake to party. And what they're going to do is they're going to take a new drug called somnambuline. It's a drug that basically combined with alcohol will make you really sleepy and make you trip absolute balls when combined with alcohol. All the kids begin to take this drug. One of them has a really bad reaction. And what's happening are her friends are basically dressing like Freddy and Jason and fucking with her and her friends. Like they're going around pranking them and scaring them, except now the kids are starting to die. Like all of a sudden, they're not pranks. Like, is it the real Freddy or is it the real Jason? The movie ends up being revealed to be a really bad dream by the lead character.
Oh, can you imagine that? That has to be the worst take out of all of them.
Yeah.
Like it's basically April Fool's Day, like April Fool's Day. Like,
Right.
the whole movie.
It's the whole movie ends up being a fever dream that is brought to light. Like she wakes up and they realize that she's having all of these after effects from taking this drug and falling asleep.
No matter how
See, I have
everything that comes before it. I mean, that sucks all the air out of the room. Like there's no coming back from that.
I have like very conflicting opinions on that because on one hand, that is the worst fucking idea ever, and the second one is like I don't know how many times that I've tripped balls and went through a whole Halloween movie in my head, so I understand.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. The movie brings back Dominic Necros. Like, I don't what the fuck is it about? What is it with Dominic Necros? Like,
what exactly really fought for Dominic Necros? Like, what guy kissed his wife and his kids, drank his coffee, went into New Line and is like, listen, guys, today's the day that I'm really going to make Dominic Necros land. It never land.
He is going to pop off this fucking page right now, okay?
Like, I feel like whatever exec came up with that idea, like that was his like goth name when he went to like the clubs as a teenager.
Right. So it is the most fucking 17-year-old goth like usernet like chat board name.
Yes. It's like early whore sites would love that name.
Right.
You know? Like, I mean, no offense to these dudes because they're like legends in the field and I love each of them on a personal matter. But like Uncle Creepy, Ryan Rotten, Mr. Disgusting, like Dominic Necros would have been for one of those sites.
So here is a challenge to our listeners. If you have a baby coming up, if you name your baby Dominic Necros and we want a copy of the birth certificate, we will send you something nice for a prize.
I have a laser disc of Jason Lives. It is yours. It is fucking yours if you name your baby Dominic Necros.
I have a signed picture of PJ Souls, so I will throw that into the mix. All right?
I don't give a fuck. I have a box set of the Halloween movies. Dominic Necros as your kid. It's not going to you. I just wanted to sound
throw that in there, okay? So this is an idea that the Elm Street remake will actually borrow from years later. The nightmares in this movie don't take place in this dream world, but they kind of like Crystal Lake fades in and out of the dream world in present reality. So you, as an audience, you never really know what is a dream and what's real right now, which is kind of neat. But also, given the rest of the movie, not really that great. I don't think it would have gone really well. So Dominic Necros is in it. Dominic Necros murders Lizzie's boyfriend, tosses his heart into the lake. So to your point, Alex, this is another script that takes that idea. When the heart gets tossed in, Jason comes back. And to make things even more confusing, because Jason and Freddy are supposed to be fictional characters of their own movie franchises, Goyer and Robinson bring back the plot point of Freddy being a camp counselor who rapes and murders young Jason, which I don't know how that can be a plot point when they're not in the same movie series at this point.
Well, that's something I do appreciate in the final Freddy vs. Jason we got. They didn't, like so many of these previous drafts, they didn't bother trying to connect them. They didn't make Freddy a camp counselor. They didn't make Jason an Elm Street kid. They just, I mean, we got a hint of that in the dream sequence where we see Jason drown, but like it was obviously a dream. But like it's so hard to just kind of, especially back then. Now it's a lot more common, but to just kind of retcon stuff that's so established in the timeline. I'd rather a movie that kind of just takes place like in this ether where you're not sure exactly where it takes place in the timeline than one that completely reverts so much that we've already seen. Yeah,
no, I agree.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I like that it's a return to a Freddy that you see in part 3, 4, and 5. It's a Freddy that knows your weaknesses and plays on them.
And exploits it, yeah.
And exploits it. That's a really good idea. I think that's where we go. All right. So this basically, here's the deal. Sean Cunningham and New Line Cinema, throughout this whole ordeal, they're now about 5 or 6 years in, and neither of them can come to agreement of what a Freddy versus Jason movie should be. They agree on one thing.
No Dominic
This script-
Necros.
Nope, not even that, because Dominic Necros is in the next couple drafts.
Oh my God.
The Goyer and Robinson script sucks. They do not. They both are like, fuck no, we're not making this movie. There are 2 other scripts that kind of go in this direction. I think Abel and Berger are one of them overall, but basically, after about 2 years, Rob Bottin just stops answering calls from Cunningham and New Line Cinema.
Well, wouldn't you, when every single call puts Dominic Necros in your face?
So but I think like the Necros thing, I think Bottin was on board. I think he's part of his treatment overall. But he's just like, these guys are never going to get it together. I'm going to play Tekken. She probably would have been John Carpenter playing video games. But Bottin is basically like, this ain't getting done. I'm changing my phone number. I'm hiding in the woods. Like, he's not
never coming back.
They just like, has anyone heard from Rob? And everyone's like, no. So
I
basically,
wonder if Freddy versus Jason and Dominic Necros is what made Rob Bottin just like check out. Like,
Exactly.
we still haven't heard from him.
basically, at this point, between 1997 and 1998, New Line Cinema and Sean Cunningham have taken a giant pile of money and they have lit it on fire. That's what they've done at this point. This is when Cunningham says, like, okay, enough is enough. If you guys aren't going to make a movie, I'm going to make a Jason movie. And this is when Jason X comes to be. Like, he gives them this arbitrary deadline to say, get me a script that's going to be greenlit so we can make this movie. And they don't. So he's like, all right, we're sending Jason to space. One small step for mankind, one giant step for hockey mask serial killers, basically.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Like, in between the draft they try to get going after this is by, I'm going to mispronounce the name here, Mark Verheiden, he was the creator of the Mask movie. So he's kind of a hot commodity, but even he cannot come up with a working script. I think he eventually goes on to do like Jason versus Freddy versus Ash for comic books, or some of the comic books, but he makes one last run at the Bottin trilogy of scripts, and it's basically the same framework. They take this drug, it mixes bad with alcohol, it amplifies their nightmares. The friends are all suffering deaths, and you don't know if it's a dream world or the real world. So I think the one thing is, like, there's a direct reference to Rob Lane from the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie. His younger brother appears in a supporting role. I think this movie doesn't get made because Dominic Necros, Jerry, you are correct. No Dominic Necros.
It's a bummer. I would have liked to. No, I'm just kidding. I can't even pretend.
So, all right. So this, at this point, takes us all the way up to the point where a script gets made at this point. So let's end part 1 of this episode right here with where we are by 2001, okay?
Nowhere.
We are nowhere. New Line Cinema has been absorbed into Time Warner. Time Warner has been absorbed into America Online. By 2001, New Line Cinema has a string of flops. Little Nicky, starring Adam Sandler as like the Devil's Kid, cost like $45 million to make and makes $15 million. And this is Sandler coming off of like 4 really good comedies. Sandler coming off The Wedding Singer, The Waterboy, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore. This is his first flop at this point. Dungeons and Dragons comes and goes. It loses like $40 million. Now, the biggest flop is a movie called Town and Country starring Warren Beatty. It makes $6 million on a $90 million budget.
Jesus.
$90 fucking million for a Warren Beatty movie that is not Dick Tracy.
Dude, I freak out if I lose $5.
I know.
Let alone fucking like 84 million out of 90.
Right. So I don't get. Sometimes I hear these like what some of these dramas that have no special effects, what they cost to make, and my mind is completely blown away by how much they cost and who thinks that you're gonna. And that's $90 million in $2001. So that's Avengers budget right there. Like you should have Thanos coming down to snap this movie out of existence at this point, Kim. Okay, so Mike DeLuca is promptly shown the door after greenlighting this movie to go nowhere. Basically, after like a decade of trying to develop Freddy versus Jason, being a real champion for it, he and Bob Shea. It's written that they don't really have one falling out, but that Bob Shea has kind of grown tired of Mike DeLuca's antics behind the scenes and them just butting heads over creative ideas over and over again. Because Bob Shea is very much a like, let's just get this shit done type of guy. And it's gonna
we've seen Freddy's Dead.
It's gonna stick in his craw that like this is the house that Freddy built, and he can't get this movie off the ground.
Well, it must be like a slap to the face, like something as huge as Nightmare on Elm Street having so many problems getting this Freddy versus Jason thing. I mean, somebody has to take the blame for it. I mean, why not DeLuca?
Yeah, and he does at this point. DeLuca is, shown the door. The other thing that happens right now with the AOL Time Warner merger, 2,400 people are shown the door. So, a lot of people lose their jobs, which sucks, which always happens in these mergers. New Line Cinema goes from having 600 employees to 500 employees. 100 people, or almost 20% of their team, is given a pink slip at this point, including a number of people that are involved with Freddy versus Jason. Before Mike DeLuca is fired, he does two things that get this movie finally on the track to get made. Number one, he hires Shannon and Swift to write a spec script of Freddy versus Jason based on some ideas they had pitched him. And number two, he hires one of his interns, Jeremy Katz, to come on board. Jeffrey Katz. Jeff Katz, my bad. He hires Jeff Katz to the Freddy versus Jason developmental team. And these three are really going to be the ones that shepherd. They're going to shepherd the process along to finally get this movie made after a decade. So I think to our listeners right now, we are over an hour in, and we're almost an hour and a half in. So I think we should record some final thoughts right now on the development process of Freddy versus Jason, and then come back with part 2 of this episode next week. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that out of all of the franchises that have went through so many interesting takes that were never used, I think the story of Freddy versus Jason getting made is a really just enthralling and interesting one. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have Tarantino wanting to write Halloween, around the time of Halloween 6. You have New Line passing on Peter Jackson doing Freddy's Dead. These are all huge things in history of slasher cinema. But Freddy versus Jason gave us Dominic Necros. And I'd rather be reading about Dominic Necros than most things. So, I am there.
So out of all the ideas, good, bad, and different that we just heard. And by the way, I think we covered maybe half of the ideas right now. I cannot recommend the book Slash of the Titans enough, The Road to Freddy versus Jason by Dustin McNeil. I think we should probably reach out and try to speak to him at some point. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is a breezy read. Like, you could get through it in an afternoon. It is a fascinating look at how the sausage gets made. And as much as we've kind of like taken the piss a little bit, McNeil really approaches this idea from a place of how much he loves these movies, and that really comes through in every page. Like, I think it's like $10 on Amazon Kindle. Well,
I'm buying it. I'm buying it as soon as we're done. Like, it sounds great.
So, Alex, which of these ideas that we've covered so far intrigues you, piques your interest the most?
I think It's hard to say because I think every script has some strengths. I don't think any is overall as strong as what we ended up with, but it sounds like it's less that like everyone really believed in the Shannon Swift draft and more just like they were kind of in the right place at the right time because that's when this whole regime change happened. But for whatever reason, I think it worked out for the best. However, I think the best approach is, and I hate to say it because I don't love it, but like the Fredheads, the earlier drafts that we talked about are probably the best. I don't think the meta elements work or like making them fictional characters within this universe. Like I said, I think the Fredheads is a cool concept, not necessarily for Freddy versus Jason, but I would love to see a Nightmare on Elm Street like rebooted with that concept or something similar to that.
Just change the name.
Yes, definitely lose
Firewalkers or some shit.
But yeah, just nothing like makes me super excited for it, which is kind of crazy that with all these drafts, all these super talented writers, people that came from really great stuff and went on to do really great stuff, and nobody really kind of got it right, despite having all this time and money and energy. And
until first-time writers.
That's what I was going to say. The people who did never had a script produced before. So I mean, just the nature of the industry, I guess. But super interesting.
Well, it wasn't uncommon though. I mean, look at A Nightmare on Elm Street part. I mean, Chuck Wilson, Dream Warriors is his first movie, correct?
Chuck Russell, right?
Chuck Russell, thank you. Am I wrong about that? I could be wrong about that.
That sounds right. I'm not positive though.
I believe so. I mean, him like Russell and Darabont, right?
Right. That was their first big thing. And Rennie Harlan had only done like a small movie before getting Elm Street 4. And he basically...
he went straight from prison. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The movie prison.
Yeah. Once he got out of... Yeah. We are in no way insinuating that Rennie Harlan is a criminal right here. We don't want to get sued.
Criminally great.
Right. He really is. Look, anybody that can land Gina Davis has my respect. God, I love Gina Davis. But he basically hung around New Line Cinemas, didn't shower, didn't bathe, and said, give me an Elm Street movie. Give me an Elm Street. And Bob Shave's like, just fucking give him a movie. Like, let him do it.
That is totally going to be my fucking approach to do a Halloween movie.
Yeah, let's start staking out Blumhouse.
Jason Blum's going to kick me off the stairs. Get him out of here.
But he just basically, so like you were getting, I mean, Rachel Tallahay, who, look, as much as like I think we're going to cover Freddy's Dead one day and we'll be pretty mixed on it, but she has become the go-to person during the Doctor Who years for Stephen Moffat. He was like, I need a really good episode. Rachel, you're going to direct this one. Like, she's gone on to be an acclaimed director in television. And a lot of these were people that this is how they got their start. And they brought a lot of heart. They brought a lot of imagination. They brought a lot of fresh ideas to these movies overall. And, you didn't need like a huge name in order to direct a Freddy versus, I mean, like you said, Alex, Freddy versus Jason, like, it's going to sell itself.
Yeah.
It's going to make a lot of money just based on the name alone. Even though both series had hit their commercial nadir at this point. So it's pretty interesting overall to see why it took so long. Like, I think if DeLuca and Cunningham were left in charge of the approval process, we would be talking today about a movie that never got made.
Yes, I wish Cunningham would approve legal papers.
Right. I think, to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if you go back and find out Cunningham would be like, we should make Freddy versus Jason, except Jason can't be in it because I think that character is stupid. Because Cunningham hates the character of Jason, yet he will cling to everything about it with his two greedy, fucking ham-fisted fingers to squeeze every goddamn penny that he can out of it, and nobody else gets a slice of pie at that point. Am I wrong? Am I saying that? Am I wrong?
You know what? I agree. There's a lot. I think. Okay, I understand creating something. You want your respect. You want what you're owed. And I understand Victor Miller. He wrote it. I understand that. But at the same point, you got to look outside yourself. At this point, you are basically and I'm not going to candy coat it. At this point, you're basically fucking the fans.
Yeah.
Like it's shitty. It's a bummer. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, don't overthink it. But I mean, we're not even to that point anymore. We're not to the point of like, okay, you guys, your approaches to the new Friday the 13th are awful. Let's get a different one. We're to the point where we can't get anything until these two guys just settle it, and it's so fucking shitty.
Mm-hmm. And you're only hurting. To your point about saying you're hurting the fans, I think, to be quite honest, when money is involved, all parties are going to say, who cares? But they're hurting themselves. Like, they're not making a penny on this right now. Like, there are people desperate for a Friday the 13th movie. Never Hike Alone has gotten like 500,000 or over 1 million views on YouTube alone. Right? People want to see that movie so bad, and that's a really well done fan film, but it's a fan film.
The thing is, even like bigger directors, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but even like bigger directors, even in the horror community, have actively tried to get things going. Mm-hmm. I know Mike Mendez. I mean, I don't think it was announced, but I know Mike Mendez went and shot a proof of concept Friday the 13th, basically short. That was going to go with that found footage approach that they were teasing every once in a while. Because I know because a friend of mine starred in what Mike Mendez shot. Everyone's trying to get stuff made throughout the years. It is all being held up by two greedy people.
Mm-hmm. And
it sucks.
It really does suck. They're only hurting themselves at this point. It's really frustrating. Neither of those guys are making a penny off it right now, and it sucks because it's just greed at this point.
Well, even the video game, we can't get new content on the video game until they squash this stuff.
Yeah, and people are thirsting, absolutely thirsting for this movie at this point. So, this is not a George Romero situation where someone filed the wrong copyright and George Romero didn't make a penny off Night of the Living Dead for years. No matter how the judgment comes out for Cunningham, he's going to make a good amount of money when the Friday the 13th franchise goes back into production. He might not make all of the money, but he's going to make more than he could spend in any number of lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And that's what really sucks, is that kind of level of greed. And I'm not afraid to say that. Like, that's just really how it is. It's a real bummer that's what it comes down to. All right. Should we answer some of these questions on Twitter now, or should we save it for the next part?
Why don't we answer half of them?
Let's do it right now. Okay. So, username Peter Jackson at _. I know I saw this and I'm like, Peter Jackson follows us. So I would say, folks, if you're listening for the first time and thinking of listening to more, just know a gentleman with the same name as the guy who made the Lord of the Ring movies thinks we're pretty good. I think that's a ringing endorsement.
That's incentive right there.
So at Pete _Jackson wants to know, was there ever a thought to use Tommy Jarvis in these movies? Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Adam Marcus. The Adam Marcus concept, which never got made, was one of them.
Classic Marcus.
Okay. All right, here we go. I think we'll save this. Well, we'll do it now. Considering the wink from Freddy at the end of the... this is from Tristan at TJEJ107 from Tristan. Tristan, thanks for listening. Considering the wink from Freddy at the end of the film, I've been praying for a sequel ever since. How well do you think each character is portrayed in this film? Let's do this now. Let's do it as a little teaser for the next episode. Alex, I'd love you to go first.
Yeah, go for it.
We've talked a shit ton right now, and I want to make sure you're getting represented.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, Tristan, I actually, contrary to a lot of naysayers' belief, I think it's pretty well represented. You don't, to Jerry's point earlier, Jason does kind of act as a puppet, but only to a point. It's really like just the first act of the movie, and then the whole what makes it Freddy versus Jason is Jason goes off and just keeps killing when he's only supposed to. I believe in the original Shannon Swift draft, Freddy's thing is like you only have to kill one person and he just goes on a rampage. But nonetheless, he kills too many people, more than Freddy wants. So in that regard, like Jason gets almost all the kills in the movie. There's like the cornfield scene is amazing. That feels like vintage Friday the 13th. And then on the other side of it, like I said, Jason gets all the kills. Freddy only has one kill, but it is cool. It's like a kind of a classic Freddy moment. Mm-hmm. And beyond that one kill, there are 3 or 4 dream sequences. So it still has a Nightmare on Elm Street feel. Mm-hmm. And based on what we've talked about today, I can't imagine any of these scripts, even if they had a director who was a super fan of the movies, if they're working from any of these scripts that we discussed, I mean, I don't think you'd have something that would feel as well-rounded in both Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th Legacies as the film that we ended up with.
Yeah, I think it's a good. I think all of that's really good points. Jerry, how about you? I think you're going to have. Do you want to answer this now, or do you want to save it for part 2?
I'll go for it. It's kind of fresh in my mind.
Let's just do a little teaser. That's because I think we're going to get really in the weeds on it in the next show.
Totally. I think the character of Freddy Krueger is represented very well in Freddy versus Jason. I think Jason is the character that isn't represented as great as Freddy was. Jason's scared of the water. He's kind of a puppet. He serves no purpose until he kind of stands up to Freddy other than to do Freddy's bidding. And to me, Freddy versus Jason feels like a Freddy movie just with Jason in it and just with Jason doing the kills for Freddy. I would have much rather seen, Freddy versus Jason, which, I mean, you get kind of at the end, but leading up to it, it's very much, in my opinion, just Freddy's deal. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Freddy's represented. Jason, not so much.
So, and I think we're going to get into why Jason might be underrepresented more in the next episode. I partially agree with that statement overall. I think this is a phenomenal portrayal of Freddy Krueger. Number one, you get Robert Englund stepping into the role for one last time, and you can tell how much fun he's having with this role. But also, Freddy is scary in this one. They bring back, this is, although he has some one-liners and quips in the movie, Freddy's not there to fuck around. This isn't Freddy playing video games in the movie.
Kids missing eyeballs.
Yeah. This is
kids. Yeah.
He brings his A game. I really like the portrayal of Freddy Krueger in this one. All right, let's do one more now. All right. From Marcos Codas, username Marcos Codas on Twitter, who Marcos, I think, is the one who really wants us to cover Mandy. And I'm like, no, I hate that movie so much. I never want to be mean when we cover a movie. But I honestly think that might, I think Jerry and I are going to save that for Fantastic Fest one year. I really think. Or maybe we do it as a bonus episode when we're in Telluride, because it's impossible for me to be in a bad mood in Telluride. But I think people would end up turning off the show based on me alone on that movie. But okay, getting to the point. Marcos wants to know, who do you think Jason should have faced instead of Freddy? Preferably from a modern. This is an interesting question. Who should, if you didn't do Freddy versus Jason, who would you have Jason face?
Modern? He said modern?
So let's say 2000 on. Let's say 2000.
Wow. That's good. Man, you guys can go first on that one. I'm going to have to think about that for a second.
All right, Alex. I'm going to pass. I'm putting this in your lap right now.
First thing that comes to mind, well, even if you just say modern slasher, first thing that comes to mind is Victor Crowley from the Hatchet franchise.
Yeah.
And that would also have a cool, meta element because they're both played by Kane Hodder. Well, I mean, not Freddy versus Jason, but Jason, obviously, the most times is played by Kane Hodder, and he plays.
That would have given us what, I mean, I love Hatchet 3, but that would have given us what we thought what Hatchet 3 was going to give us. Derek Pierce against Kane,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that would be fun, but it'd also be kind of redundant because, I mean, they're both these, slashers in the woods. It would be a lot easier to write and develop than Freddy vs. Jason, I would think. And no disrespect to those movies because I love them both, but they're just they almost take place in the same world, at a glance. So I think a little more exciting one might be Leslie Vernon from Behind the Mask. Which already is kind of meta, but it is established that Jason exists in his universe. So I think that'd be a fun one. Plus, he's also a talking killer. As much as I'd love to see Michael versus Jason, they're both these kind of similar archetypes, strong, silent killers that wear masks. I think Leslie Vernon, because he talks, he'd have give it a different vibe, but he's still kind of more woodsy in terms of Jason's style. So I think that'd be a fun one.
I want Jason versus Nicolas Cage character from the Grindhouse trailers. Like I want Jason versus Nicolas Cage as Fu Manchu.
Honestly, just Jason versus Nicolas Cage as Nicolas Cage.
Can you imagine going to the theater and asking for that movie? Yeah, can I get one for Jason versus Nicolas Cage?
Well, there was, speaking of Mandy, I know it was popular when that movie came out. That
we don't speak of that movie on this podcast.
The director had Nick Cage watch Friday the 13th. I think it was part 7 to like get in the mindset.
Yeah.
Mandy.
For sure. I remember that.
Oh, God.
So it's hard to look.
All right. I have 2 answers here. I want him to take on Esther from the Orphan movie. Be awesome. I actually would love to see drop Jason from part 3 and part 4 into the Stranger Things universe.
Oh, wow.
And have the kids from Stranger Things take on a slasher killer.
I thought for sure, which isn't exactly what you said, but like not far off. I thought for sure with the new version of Stephen King's It being set in the 80s and being put out by New Line, and in the original It novel, they're afraid of like the original Universal monster movies. So I thought for sure they were going to have Freddy Krueger, and it would have been the perfect opportunity to get.
That is such a good point.
And I believe the director or someone came out and said like that's a cool idea, and like somebody might have mentioned that at one point, but ultimately like it would have taken too much focus off of Pennywise, which I understand and respect. But just the fan service of that moment would have been like, I mean, unforgettable.
It would have made 100% sense for the time, even if it's only a quick, like, 5-frame thing. It doesn't have to be a big deal.
And there is like a nod of having, I think it's like Nightmare on Elm Street 5, because I think it takes place in 89, is like on the marquee at the movie theater. And that's when I was like, when I was watching the movie for the first time, I was like, oh man, they're really going to do this. And then obviously they didn't.
You know, it's funny, Mike, when you said that you would drop Jason, I only heard drop at first. So I thought you were going to say you'd want Jason versus Drop Dead Fred. And I would pay for that movie.
Jason versus Pee Wee Herman.
Oh,
I do think the idea of like a coming of age kids against a slasher. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of a prominent example of that happening. I think that's a good idea.
Final chapter.
well,
yeah, but I'm thinking like a group of
I know. Totally.
Closest
like
thing to it
with Jason, I guess.
So here's my idea: if you were to, because Blumhouse is on the record of saying they want to get more than Michael Myers under their belt, like they want to get all the icons. You remake the Monster Squad with Freddy, with Jason, with Chucky.
That would be amazing.
Michael, some combination of that. And you redo the Monster Squad. And you let Joe Lynch direct it. I've pitched this to Joe Lynch on Twitter. He's on board. Jason Blum, you have so much fucking money.
The only issue with that is they had to move mountains to get Halloween made. I mean, that's like 3 or 4 companies had to come to agreement and over, a long time. Like, can you imagine how much? Exactly. Can you imagine how much of a headache that would be? Like bring in like 4 or 5 different slashers. I would pay for it.
Who does Blumhouse have? So they're doing the Invisible Man. Who does Blumhouse have under their roof for like really iconic?
Well, if they do the Invisible Man,
Activity.
That's right.
You're right. They got the new Black Christmas. If Invisible Man goes well, they're going to keep doing Universal monster movies. So they could do a new Monster Squad with their reinvention of the Universal monsters. They could be cool.
I just think like the Universal monsters, and I love them, and it pains me to say this, they're not going to resonate with kids now. Do you know what I mean?
I am concerned about, like, I trust Lee Whannell. He's going to come up with something cool, but yeah, I don't know if it'll be like scary per se. I don't know. I'm interested to see.
Lee Whannell's going to knock it out of the park. Everything this guy, I think Lee Whannell is so fucking talented, and he knows how to make like if you haven't seen Cooties, like it's an idea that's like, how has no one made this movie? And it's so much fun and so good.
The Mule is another one that God, I love that movie.
He's just Upgrade was awesome.
Yeah. Upgrade is fucking blast. Like we're all fans of Lee Whannell here. If you're not a fan of Lee Whannell, what are you doing with your life? Okay, here's the deal, folks. We are now Wow, we are over an hour and a half in, and we haven't even talked about the movie. So we are going to break this up into 2 parts, so that way you get you get a prequel and a sequel for Freddy versus Jason. And I feel kind of, Jerry, I am so sorry because I know you're not a huge fan of this movie, and we're going to talk for like 3 hours about it. And
no, it's totally okay. You know, as long as I got to talk a little bit about Dominic Necros, I'm okay.
Yes, okay. So, to our listeners, join us next week. Follow us over at Pod and Pendulum over in Twitter. Share us, leave us a review over at iTunes and Stitcher. Because of your reviews, we have cracked the top 1,000 TV and film podcasts over in iTunes, and that, you know, I laugh. I'm like, top 1,000. Oh, come on, what are we doing here? But you know, I am going to obsessively track our ranking from here on in, and I will not rest until we're in the top like 736 or something. So we'll be back next week with Freddy versus Jason Part 2. Thank you for bearing with us. We'll talk to you next week. All right, guys, here's like, if we can do one thing, could we pause for like 5 minutes so I can take my dog out to pee, and then we'll rejoin the call at like 8 o'clock. Is that cool?
I would love to take that time out so I can pee. So I am definitely on board.
So 10 minutes from now. All right. And if we ever need pee breaks, let me know. And I'm going to hang it up now. That way it'll be easier to edit. Okay. Perfect.
All right. Sounds good.
Sounds good.